Representative Grove.
Thank you very much. I assume that's going to be a capital budget expenditure.
That's correct. And I would say also, I mean, while it is quite expensive, relative to some of the other buildings in Harrisburg, we are not asking for additional funds over and above what we would ordinarily get for a capital bill. We're cutting back on some of our other capital projects to make this project happen because we feel it is so important.
Is that in the current capital budget, a previous capital budget? Are you looking to put that in a future capital budget?
Most of the money is in previously released funds. There is some additional funding that we need, partly because we had one site originally wound up needing to move the archives into the city of Harrisburg, so we had some additional costs that came up. So there is some additional money in the current capital bill, but quite a significant amount of it is in previous bills.
Okay. Was it in one lump sum or spread out through a couple?
Actually, it was spread out through a couple, and because of the way DGS is working right now, they're trying to consolidate projects. So, for example, we're adding a portion of the State Records Center into this existing building, and that was we originally had $15 million that was given for the State Records Center, so they were being folded in two lump sums together. We've asked for that $15 million again with this in the current archives because DGS's accounting, it's very difficult for them to pull apart those two projects and keep the bean counting in two separate pots. So they've asked us to put that $15 million again into this capital bill so it all reads as archives money. So there was $15 million that was previously released that we're not going to be using, and the $15 million is now dedicated for archives that we will be using, if that makes sense. It's
yeah,
a
it
little bit
does.
Convoluted.
Could you just, at some point, just supply the committee with kind of like the historical capital
sure.
budget,
I'd be
just to
happy
see
to.
where it's programmed in at? That would be great.
Of course.
Governor's budget, current governor's executive budget book, you have capital projects as of $27.8 million.
Okay, yes. Yes.
All right. The projects here are all owned and operated by the Museum Historical. How do you determine what projects you have will get put into a capital budget year to year?
Okay, so the way that we determine that is we do site surveys across all our sites. We actually do maintenance checklists. We have our maintenance people quarterly go through and say, this needs to be repaired or what have you. And then we look at those projects and we see if they are things that we can address using the only other funds that we have available to do work on our buildings are Keystone funds. So if it will be a Keystone funded project or if it needs to be a capital project. Obviously our threshold for capital projects is $300,000. So anything that is greater than that by default has to be a capital project. Then we look at our sites and see if there are typical kinds of problems, like a lot of wooden roofs that need to be done or a lot of infrastructure work, and start to bundle those into capital projects. Our focus for tiering those capital projects, we look at life safety, we look at building envelope, we look at really making sure we're preserving the buildings. If you look at our most recent capital project out at Old Economy, it's basically wood roofs. It's adding air conditioning to the wrap house so that we can maintain the finishes we just put in there. It's redoing the infrastructure that is failing. A lot of our sites were heavily developed in the 60s and 70s, and the infrastructure is aging out right now, so we're getting large-scale upgrades that need to be done. So we look at those kinds of things, and those rise to the top. I mean, we would love to be doing multi-million-dollar exhibit upgrades, but to be honest, when roofs are leaking or, ADA is not being met or, systems are failing, those just automatically rise to the top. So that's generally the way we create capital projects.
Okay. The project list you have here, I assume you have more project lists. These are just kind of what you feel is the most important ones to do to kind of preserve those entities.
That's correct. That's
do you know? How many projects do you currently have? Do you know off the top of your head?
Oh my gosh. Do you mean in our backlog or in our backlog? That's a good question. I mean, really, you could probably say one per site. You could say 29, but as far as established ones,
we probably have close to, depending on how we describe them, right? We probably
close to 100 projects in the backlog list, and I think I counted close to $20 million just at sites. So that doesn't count the rest of the agency.
But Brenda, I'm sorry, those are capital projects you're talking about?
Oh, those are Keystone projects.
Keystone projects, no capital projects, yeah.
So,
Keystone projects, we have a huge backlog.
yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
And then for Keystone, about 100 projects, and you phase them over multiple years?
Exactly.
All right, so you don't
Exactly.
do like all them at one time. They're
No, we
just
can't.
phased in.
Yeah,
It's impossible to do.
Right.
Correct.
Right.
Okay. Historical Preservation Fund. The governor's budget book lists current balance at $9.9 million. Beginning cash balance $8.5 million. Receipts about $3.197 million. There's admission fees, interest, and then there's a line of other. Do you know what that other is?
I can speak to that.
Okay.
The Historic Preservation Fund holds mitigation dollars where the State Historic Preservation Office has a responsibility under programmatic agreements and other agreements with federal agencies primarily to carry out work. It is essentially just a holding tank as we're working through the state procurement process to get those very specific scopes of work done. $6 million of that fund is mitigation as a result of the Shell petrochemical facility along the Ohio River in Beaver County. Shell needed to receive an Army Corps permit to build in the Ohio River and actually resulted in the complete destruction of a number of archaeological and historic resources that were significant. And to mitigate the loss of those resources, Shell agreed to pay this mitigation that would benefit other preservation projects locally, regionally, and statewide. And so that programmatic agreement between our office, the Army Corps of Engineers, and Shell Petrochemical has a very specific scope of work with a number of how that fund is going to be cut up and redistributed, and we are working through that process now.
So the mitigation funds are any private entity that is doing a scope of work. They give you money as an agreement, and then you use that money for other historical preservation programs.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, is that the only thing in the other? Is that it?
No, there are some other smaller mitigation projects that we're also working through. There are a number. I think, gosh, there were
7, I think.
about
All right. So
7.
so the other category is just mitigation projects.
I believe so.
Oh, I'm sorry, what number are you looking at when you're referring to other?
So there's a list under receipts. So money in, there's admission fees, interest, and then other. It's just other. So I was just trying to see what that other is. What money is going in to that other?
Oh, going in.
Yeah, so 15, 16, 2.6 million, 3.5 million last year, estimated $2 million this year. So what is?
There's also money that comes in through the deaccession fund. So that is when we have a committee that evaluates, and Beth can probably speak to this better than I can, but that evaluates artifacts and whether they really do have significance within our collection. So because we really are focused on trying to make sure that we maintain collections that are mission critical, and we don't want to pay for storage space for things that are not mission critical, we do occasionally deaccession things from our collection. So money that is generated from those sales goes into this fund, and then it's dedicated only for acquisition of new objects to enhance the collection, so that if something comes up that is really important for us to maintain for the people of Pennsylvania, we have the funds to go out and acquire it.
All right, so you have that sheet, right? So under the other, you have mitigation projects and the deassociation fund, correct? Is there anything else underneath that?
Special projects.
The special projects?
You're talking about money coming in or out?
Well, this is the money coming in, the other. Still focus on money coming in for the other.
We talked about admission fees.
Yeah,
We talked about publication sales.
admission fees, interest, yep.
Facilities used.
Facilities use.
Use, okay, all right.
It's the place where all of the funds that PHMC receives from outside must be, sorry, it's the place where all of the funds that PHMC receives from outside sources must be placed as per the history code. So anytime we would get money, like I said, from mitigation funds, from admission fees, sales, et cetera. This is where it goes.
Okay. And that's all that is all identified in here.
Yes.
So you're looking at ending balance of 9.9. Disbursements, only disbursements showing up in this document, governor's budget book, is $1.853 million.
And part of that is because talking with Andrea about the Shell project, there are multi-year initiatives that are embedded in that. So the Shell project is basically, as you mentioned, an offset for an impact on a historic resource. And within the programmatic agreement that Andrea was referencing, there are specific tasks that we need to carry out that are identified within that programmatic agreement. One of them is creating a database of preservation initiatives.
It's the largest fund, the statewide impact. It is also speaking to accessibility of state records. The State Historic Preservation Office maintains Pennsylvania's inventory of historic places, which state and federal agencies rely on to get through their permitting process. And so we are the repository of all of that historic property information that they need. So the biggest chunk out of the Shell mitigation is sort of revolutionizing our office in creating this electronic system which will allow state agencies to submit their reviews to us electronically. It'll allow them to access our inventory of historic properties, and it's all within a geographic information system with data behind it. And so it will just allow a much easier, friendlier way that people can communicate with our office.
So a multi-million portion of that $6 million is for this endeavor, which is a multi-year initiative. So not all of the money that that has been put into that fund has come out of that fund yet for it, which is part of why you're seeing a lag.
So, well, what are you dispersing this year of the $1.8 million? I mean, out of here, you have payroll of $1.3 million alone coming out of that fund, so that leaves $500,000. Your total list here is $8.1 million. So what is coming out? What is getting dispersed this year with the 1.8?
Part of the Shell project is ongoing, and we are sort of straddling two phases. All of those records, those paper records that we have in our files, are going to start being scanned, and so that's about a $250,000 project. We just cut the purchase order with a vendor, and then an RFP is out right now to complete the actual construction of the system. That was just issued, and so that is going to, once we're under contract and select the vendor, within, I imagine, portions of that, how it's phased, will be paid out within this fiscal year.
I guess the question is, you have a GGO of $19.6 million, and you have a payroll. You're showing a payroll of $1.3 million out of this fund. Is that accurate? You have a $1.3 million payroll coming out of the historical preservation
That's correct.
fund.
We have 17 positions that are funded that we do fund through things like admissions, things like sales. For example, over at the State Museum, 3 of our 5 security people are funded out of this fund. And part of the reason that's so critical for us to maintain that 1.3 is we can't be open at the State Museum with just 2 security guards. It just is not feasible. So this fund largely funds security staff. It funds maintenance people, and it funds a few archaeologists and 2 curators.
Okay. Can you provide a breakdown of the $1.853 million out of disbursements this year, so we can have that
Sure.
clear delineation of that? And if you could, the mitigation projects, do you actually have a timeline of expenditures of the next few years of when you're
We
going
have
to
a
be?
very, very detailed budget, yes.
Oh, that'd be great. That'd be great.
Okay.
I think I'm good. Thank you.